Man told American Airlines about a scary moment on a plane. From there, it got confusing. Let's see what the horrifying incident was.
3, 2, 1, flight off.
The following video is my opinion only and does not represent any airline, real or imagined, that I may or may not have worked for in the past, present, or future. It is just my opinion. Disclaimer, this is just me. So in the news recently, the Miami Herald posted something that ended up on Yahoo News June 11th. It takes all of 6 to 9 minutes to read. Friday, June 4th, Joseph Willett IV, 39, was returning from a work trip in Miami to his home in Raleigh, North Carolina. His flight, AA 4284, operated by Envoy, booked through American Airlines, was scheduled to take off at 2:19. I travel all the time for work. He's a regional sales manager or assistant to the regional manager for a biomedical company. He thought there was nothing that could surprise him, but what happened next, I swear I never saw anything like it. Plane was preparing for takeoff. He was sitting in seat 16 Charlie with his headphones on. He leaned back as the engines roared to life and the plane started speeding down the runway. All good, right? Then, a loud crash from somewhere near the front of the airplane. He was thrust forward against his seatbelt as the plane braked to a halt. I didn't know what was happening. I thought maybe we were on the wrong runway or that we were going to slam into another plane. I mean, I travel a lot. It wasn't like a gradual stop. We were getting ready to take off and then bam, thought something was really serious must have happened. Across the aisle, frightened passengers pulled up their window shutters. By the way, you should have those open for takeoff and landing, just so you know. You actually shouldn't have those shut. A minute or two passed, he said, before flight attendant apologized and the door at the front of the plane had opened, she said. Okay, so a door had opened. She then told us the door was locked now and they believed the problem was resolved, and then we just took off like nothing happened. He said he and the other passengers muttered to each other about how odd and frightening their experience had been as they got off the plane in Raleigh, and then he told his wife the story, and she too was shocked and upset. So Willett submitted a complaint to American Airlines for their customer service. These poor people in customer service to have to deal with this. He received an instantaneous automated response and a confirmation that they would review the complaint, logged in as number 6969. We value your feedback. We'll respond as soon as possible. Here's a picture of the fella. People who travel a lot for a living exchange war stories about headaches, hassles, and scary moments in the air. But what made this event especially strange is that the airline would tell both that it never happened. The incident was not only unusual, but could have been quite serious. So they actually went to this aviation expert and professor at Harvard. God. The Herald relayed his concerns to the airlines, and AA got back and said, hey, we've been researching this. There's no record of it happening. In the meantime, the reporter contacted the NTSB to ask if they had any record of the incident. The NTSB said no, go to the FAA. They also said no, it never happened. So we've checked all our sources with our regional partners, and the flight departed 3 minutes early and there were no service disruptions. There was no record of the event taking place. 5 days after he submitted the complaint, he received an email response. It did not explain what had occurred, whether it was being investigated or if the crew or passengers had been interviewed. But it did say, there's nothing more important than safety. All of our training and procedures are designed to ensure safety, comfort, and well-being of our customers. Willett did not think that sufficed. He was full Karen at this point. All I wanted for them was to acknowledge my feelings. Sorry, that's not what he says. All I wanted for them to acknowledge what happened and make sure that something like this wouldn't happen again in the future. Wouldn't happen again. But instead, they're just trying to pretend like it never happened, even though the plane was full of witnesses who heard and saw what happened. It's disgraceful. He wrote back asking what American meant, and then Watt left a voicemail. Of course, we would never deny that it occurred. You witnessed it yourself. This is not a compensable type of situation that we would compensate for. So he's looking for money. But we do know that it was a safety issue, and we have recorded what you said and sent that over for training purposes to that station. He had not asked for any compensation, so he was confused. Okay, maybe he wasn't. About an hour later, he followed up by email, per my voicemail. Anytime an email starts with as per, you know things are getting serious. We would never deny that this incident happened. She wrote, "I'm sure that a report was done internally by the crew and for a flight attendant whose job it was to secure the door. Your opinion of us is very important. Your continued patronage is essential. We appreciate your loyalty." He was still confused. What were they going to dress? What went wrong? God, what? We'll get to it. Let's just get through this article, for the love of God. As to how the incident had been redressed, she wrote, "We do not receive any feedback from station managers and customer relations or to passengers, any action taken by management." Watt added, "Joseph, I know it was not a good situation, but I'm sure it was handled appropriately. We appreciate you for bringing it to our attention as well. Thank you again." On the afternoon of Friday, June 11th, moments after this article was posted, Miami corporate called the Herald and said she had just learned today that the cockpit door, which they've said like 4 times in this article, had opened as the plane was preparing for takeoff. They closed it. It was a non-issue. Willett, still angry, said he doesn't understand why an open cockpit door would cause a plane to screech to a halt. Willett said he is switching to Delta. This is society in a nutshell. This guy's a year older than me, so I'm embarrassed for my own generation. Everybody is so narcissistic that they think that the world revolves around them and that this kind of stuff, they demand answers for this minor inconvenience. Okay, so here's what happened. Envoy takes the runway, centers it up, cleared for takeoff, pushes the throttles up, thrust set, don't know who was flying, doesn't really matter. As they start accelerating down the runway, the cockpit door opens. I've had this happen before. Cockpit door opens. They look back. Hey, the cockpit door's open. Now, most captains, and I don't know what the training is at Envoy, but we train in rejected takeoff procedures and V1 cuts where you lose an engine at rotation or before stuff. And usually, I think it's about 80 knots. It's been a while since I've done this, but they say, I will reject above 80 knots for fire, failure, fear, or shear. So engine fire of some sort or a fire anywhere, engine failure, fear that the thing won't fly, and then wind shear. Below 80 knots, you can reject for just about anything. So what happened was as soon as they went to their takeoff power, airplane starts accelerating. The result is the door that wasn't properly latched open. It swings open and hits that wall, that by the bathroom there, and it makes a loud noise. So they're like, hey, door's open. Looks at the airspeed. Oh, we're below 80 knots. Okay, we can reject and fix that. Why do they reject and fix that? Because it is a security issue to have a cockpit door open. You guys remember 9/11? We're still kind of worried about security, so having an open cockpit door. Now, when it's happened to me in the past, it's been well above 80 knots. On rotation, the thing opens, and you just look back and go, well, we can't do anything. And as soon as the flight attendant can get up, they close it. But because it was at a slow speed, they reject it. I believe it was a reportable incident through the Aviation Safety Action Program, ASAP, through the FAA and the airline, because of the fact that they actually reached takeoff power and then rejected the takeoff or did an abort. However, the ASAP program is typically anonymous. It is for data tracking and to report safety-related stuff. It is not punitive in any way. It doesn't mean that this was a big deal. It just means it was a reportable incident. The reason they couldn't find it or the FAA didn't know about it is because the ASAP program is confidential, and it does take several weeks to several months to get entered into the system so that they can analyze the data, and the company side, the union side, and the FAA can all take a look at it and review it. So that's probably why within a couple days they didn't find it. For the NTSB, well, they investigate mishaps or accidents that involve loss of life or property damage. So they're not involved in that and they don't care. That's why they said, hey, go to the FAA. It's just you're not going to find that information in a couple days. Whether the airline knew about it, it's customer service. They're not going to have that information. They don't get ASAP. It's the safety side of the airline that gets that information. So in this case, it's just a matter of the information getting through the system. It's not that the airline was or the FAA were purposely hiding the information or saying it didn't happen. It's just by then the information had not made its way through the system. Going back to this article now, knowing this, going back to this article, he says he hears a loud crash. Well, the loud crash is the door. They suddenly stopped. Well, because they had to close the door. They took off again like nothing happened because everything was fine. They told the passengers they had a door open. They closed the door. They continued on. Why this is so traumatic, honestly, I don't know. I mean, You look in history at some of the crashes where people survive and they're like, oh, it was traumatic and I still fly today. Why did he have to contact the manager? So he goes through this investigation of something that should have just been a non-event and says, well, I need to know that this is never going to happen again. Once he's found out, he says he doesn't understand why an open cockpit door will cause a plane to screech to a halt. Again, security issue. Can't have the open cockpit door. That door is what is protecting you from people entering the cockpit who shouldn't be, who may take control of the aircraft and use it as a guided missile. You're old enough to know about 9/11, dude. This is not anything new. The other part that he says earlier is that all I wanted was for them to acknowledge what happened and make sure that something like this wouldn't happen again in the future. Why would you say that, not knowing really what happened? Do you want airlines to not reject takeoffs when things are not right? Like, it's not that it shouldn't have happened in the future, it's that you wanted more information than you got. Now, granted, maybe they needed to sit down with you and go, look, we reject takeoffs for things. Sometimes we can't go flying. It's not this is not an automatic thing. You know, we're doing a very regulated operation, but still has dangers and risks. You've seen incidents where engines have failed, all this stuff. The pilots are very trained. They're very skilled. If they thought that that was a reason to abort, guess what? They're the pilots, so that's what's going to happen. So this whole article should not exist. Like, this is not an issue. This is not a terrifying moment. This is, you know, maybe if I had to guess, 30, 40 miles an hour, if that. And the reason it felt like such a screeching halt is because the brakes on the thing, when you reject the takeoff, the auto brakes usually they'll stop it. I mean, they're designed to make that thing stop. So I don't know which aircraft, if it was a 175 or what, but most airliners, they've just got really good brakes. So, okay, really good brakes, it's gonna stop. Did you hear the thrust reversers? Probably not, because you were too slow. So that kind of tells you that this is a non-event, that Mr. Willett is just overreacting and wasting his time. Well, actually, not just wasting his time, wasting everybody's time. And the fact that the Miami Herald thought that this was a sensational article is just poor journalism. Just like everything else, it's poor journalism. It boils down to the media wants to run with the most sensational story, with the most, to try to make the airlines look bad, to try to make these people, to give them a platform that they didn't otherwise deserve. Because this is a non-event, a 100% non-event by people who don't understand aviation. And if you've been flying as long as you have, I think you'd get a little bit smarter on how things work. I mean, just how things work, and that the world does not revolve around you and your minor inconvenience when you actually arrived on time. You're welcome. Like, that's what it is. He should thank them for keeping him safe, getting him to his destination on time, despite all this. You're welcome. Anyway, like I said, this does not represent any airline. I'm not speaking for anybody. This is just my opinion. I saw this article and I was like, God, why? Just people. Come on, man. Can we be adults? Can we just try to be adults for once and not make a big deal out of literally everything? All right. Hope you guys enjoyed this breakdown, this minor explanation. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.